Why the ISM Code has failed. The code was adopted in 1993 and came into effect in 1998. Goals were clear and simple: to enhance safety at sea, to prevent human injury and loss of life, to avoid damage to the environment. It followed a series of spectacular accidents and comments from the industry itself that perhaps competence was being eroded. Herald of Free Enterprise capsized because they left the bow door open. Scandinavian Star, where the crew couldn't communicate in a common language with one another. Exxon Valdez, huge pollution incident in Alaska. Some of you may ask, how dare I say that the code is ineffective? My response is as follows. Every accident, incident, and hazardous occurrence that has occurred since 1998 is a failure of the ISM Code. Where are the statistics? It has been in force for more than 20 years. Can somebody give me the statistics? Can somebody confirm that the ISM Code has been reviewed following each major incident? Not available. I haven't found it. So here are some of the incidents that have happened post-1998. This is the Bourbon offshore vessel that overturned and capsized. Tanker Sanchi. MSC Napoli, which broke up the English Channel. The Mersehorn fire. The Stella Daisy, a bulk carrier, sank in the South Atlantic. And the Andrew J. Barbary, which was a ferry that crashed in New York and several people were killed. The list goes on. I started my career working for a heritage company that had over 100 years history. It had its standards, and we had our pride in that company. We believed in what we were doing. 7 years later, I decided to go foreign flag, and rather than leave behind all these good things that I learned, it was a coming together of several heritage companies, all bringing these really good standards together. And so the story went on. And then another 15 years later, I did a second coming together with yet another company, once again, people coming back into the fold and bringing their good ideas with me. My last voyage at sea in command was I had to implement the safety management system on board my ship. I did that, I trained the crew, I took the ship through its first external audit, and I completed my shipboard review. And I thought, here at last is the entire industry now coming together to set a baseline standard. And I was a huge supporter, and I was so interested in it that on completion of my contract, I went straight to London and I undertook a lead auditor's course for ISO and ISM. That was my last voyage at sea, because when the company found out, they brought me into the office and I rapidly moved into the DPA position. I was a huge supporter of the code, but I remember during the time from 1993 onwards, as it was being developed, all the letters in the press complaining about what it would produce. And post the implementation, I remember one comment from the Commandant of the US Coast Guard that's saying the ISM Code is nothing more than a paper tiger. And I would tend to agree with him now. So when I go on board ships now, carrying out my inspections, which are focusing on one area, I'm asking myself the question, how is it possible, 20 years after the ISM Code has been implemented, that me, as an external inspector, are finding such basic errors, non-conformities, if you like? The answer is quite simple. Because the ISM Code has failed to recognize the basic disciplines needed to run a ship. They are not quoted anywhere. Navigation, marine engineering, cargo loading, discharging, and care on board, mooring operations, they are all the basic disciplines. And because they are not being recognized by the code, they have lost the hearts and minds of the captains. So I'm saying, why isn't the captain coming onto the bridge at 8 o'clock in the morning, going through the logbooks, etc., on the bridge, like the captains did in yesteryear? And he would pick up all these minor items, because he's in the office answering all these nonsensical messages from ashore. So we are ourselves creating the problem for the captains itself. And they are being stressed out by being pushed to answer all these messages. What's your ETA, Captain? Well, it hasn't changed much since the last message I sent you, and if you really want to keep up to date, get Marine Traffic Professional. What about the cargo? It's the same cargo we loaded a week ago. It hasn't changed. Why should I submit 4 different reports at new time because of the commercial arrangement with the ship? Why cannot we establish one single report format? I now see captains in the cabin, they've got ECDIS monitors, ARPA monitors in their office. The next thing we will see, they will be screwed onto the deckhead so that when he's lying in bed, he can see them from there. This is ridiculous. This is stressing out the captains. And not only captains, but also chief engineers, trying to explain why he can't put low sulfur fuel oil in a high sulfur fuel oil tank. So this is where things have gone wrong. Look at the text of the ISM code. I now call it the should-be code. The word should appears 88 times through the code, and should in the English language represents no obligation whatsoever. So if you get a non-conformity against the code on a ship, you should reject it and say, I'm not accepting this, because the code says should. It doesn't say shall. And the text needs to incorporate the disciplines under which the ship operates, the navigation, the seamanship, etc. In fact, we hear of the problem of those people who are trying to write logarithms for autonomous ships. They cannot deal with the word seamanship. So I will give them an example of the 21st century seamanship. It is when your laptop hangs up and freezes, you just turn it over, take the battery out, wait a few minutes, put the battery back in and turn it back up. And if it turns on, great. And if not, we've not made things any worse. It's still inoperative. So, what we are missing then from the code as it stands, the compliance element is missing. We can very rapidly change that by just changing the word should for shall. It's as simple as that. The content of the ISM code as it stands is so generic that it fails. Now, if we have an ISO code, yes, for ISO 9000, for example, that is designed to satisfy multiple activities. It could be a doctor, a dentist. It could be a filling station in Thailand. But the ISM code is about ships, and ships can be limited to specific disciplines. I argue that those who audit the ISM code are insufficiently qualified to carry out the job. And that has transferred it into a little bit of a tick box exercise. What does an engineer know about navigation if he comes on board? And what are the vast majority of auditors who come on board but classification society surveyors, who tend to be engineers or naval architects? And the code fails to win the hearts and minds of the users because it's not looking at those things they hold dear, their profession, their navigation, their marine engineering skills. And this in turn then colors the relationship between auditor and auditee. And finally, where is the section in the code that it says that it will be reviewed for its effectiveness after XX years? It doesn't exist. If we study the operation of a ship, we will see it undergoes several phases. One phase is in port when it's loading and discharging cargo and perhaps undergoing main engine repairs. The next phase is where it transfers, going from in port to sea, normally under close navigation, and then finally away from the estuaries and rivers where it's in open sea navigation, and then the reverse. There is one extra phase when it specifically goes into port for repairs. If we understand those phases, we will see that the disciplines in the operation of the ship change. So at sea, navigation is up at the top, and in port, handling the cargo, loading and discharger takes over the priority. Then we can start to focus on where a lot of these accidents are happening. So finally, the master has to review the effectiveness of the code, yes, at least once per contract. The company has to do something similar, but the code itself does not have to be reviewed. That, ladies and gentlemen, is hubris. And following that will be the nemesis of the accidents. Thank you very much.